Sunday Surefire Podcast. I'm your host, the Commish. Joining me today is the co-host, Aaron Downtown Brown.
Hey, hey.
Aaron, what's going on, my man?
Oh, not a whole lot. I guess it's a fun time of year. We've talked a whole lot of crap, leading up to this week, but I think it's startup season for a lot of us. I don't know about you, but got a couple drafts upcoming for me.
Yeah, it's definitely a good time to get a good startup draft going in the month of June into July, because before we know it, it'll be redraft season. But this is a great spot in the calendar to squeeze in another startup league. You can never have too many dynasty leagues, so the summer months are fun times to get them going. And I know we're talking dynasties and building championships. It was nice of you to wear your Kansas City Chiefs championship shirt over there, Aaron. Just
That's
really
right. Oh,
gloating
I,
there.
I I didn't even notice. I was just looking for something to match our logo,
Uh-huh.
but
Yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah. I just got so many of these Chiefs championship shirts laying around that I
right.
gotta just. It's all I wear nowadays. All the Super Bowls are stacking up. Okay, I see what
Right.
you're doing there, Aaron. I see what you're doing. Aaron thinks he's slick, but he's not. But hey, I mean, you're hunting the Patriots still, so I got to keep reminding you of that every chance I get, because we have nothing but good memories over here to look forward to, because our team stinks
That's
now.
right.
But we're not going to make this a Patriots event session or a Chiefs victory lap. We're actually talking as you might have guessed, startups. We're going to be talking a few different startup draft strategies that you can utilize. We'll talk about some of the pros and the cons of each of those and what our favorite ones are of the three we're going to discuss. We'll touch on trading a little bit here, kind of trading before the draft, trading during the draft, different avenues you can go there, and then just some common mistakes that people make in startups. Whether you're a young dynasty manager getting into one of your first ones, or even if you've been in the game for a while, there are traps that you can fall into relatively easily. So we'll talk about some of the pitfalls that can get even seasoned dynasty managers caught up in them, Aaron. So let's get talking strategy here. The first one I wanted to bring up now is kind of a sort of an all-in approach to a startup draft. That's a win now strategy. So right out of the gate here. So do you have any thoughts on what a win now strategy looks like in a startup draft in a dynasty format?
It it's funny now being a little bit more seasoned veteran in Dynasty, and I think the win now approach, as you're noticing, in a startup draft is kind of like music to your ears if you're a seasoned Dynasty player, right? Where if you're seeing other members of the league drafting certain players, and you might say, oh wow, that guy's like 30 years old. Why is he getting drafted so high, right? Like it's funny, and I guess I start off by saying that just to preface like how I got into Dynasty was actually your league that you commish. Most Dynasty managers nowadays probably are getting pitched what Dynasty is. Like if you're new to it and you get talked into joining a league, and that's exactly what had happened to me. I joined a league that was already existed a couple years in, and so a lot of my brain coming into a league is just redraft focus, right? So I think best way to explain win now is just having a complete redraft mentality of saying, hey, I want to win the championship this year, or I'm building towards. I was maybe close last year, and I just need a couple missing pieces to that puzzle to really be a contender. And you kind of sometimes give up a lot to get there, right? In dynasty value and stuff like that. So I think that's the first thing that comes to mind is just like doing whatever it takes to win, and sacrificing age if you have to for older veteran players.
Yeah, and it's the first thing that a lot of new dynasty managers think of, because it's what you're used to. In redraft, you're only focused on the next 4 months in front of you in that season. You're not worried about the long term, and essentially that's what that is in a startup. But in this case, we're doing it right out of a draft that where you're taking players and they're going to be on your roster for the long run. So the obvious con of that is if it doesn't go well and you don't win, or even if you do win, in a couple of years, you're going to have to start to retool that roster pretty quickly to keep yourself from having a 3 or 4 year drought of contention potentially. But there are some pros to it. I mean, like even in this format, you probably still want to take young players in the first couple rounds, because this is where you get your unicorns, your young productive players. Even in a win now strategy, you should be doing that. And then, but after that, like when we get to rounds like 4, 5, 6, like this is where you can get a lot of really good values at out of aging players. I mean, guys that are at least maybe still in their prime, but they only have a couple years left. You know, you're talking guys like your Mike Evans goes in like the 6th or 7th round. Your Josh Jacobs goes, 5th or 6th round. Just a handful of other guys too. Like maybe Barkley slips to the 4th round. Players that have been around for a while that you're familiar with that you're going to want them in your lineup come week one this year, but they don't necessarily make the best pure dynasty assets. And you're going to have people doing different things in your draft. Some people are going to have this approach of all in. Other people are going to take different approaches where they're taking more of a long view. So if you do go this route, just know that as great it is to have these guys in your lineup, the trade value on these players isn't going to be super marketable because you know other teams aren't necessarily all in for this year, and you don't want a 27-year-old running back if you're thinking about 2026, for example. So that's kind of a con of it too. The guys you're taking aren't necessarily going to hold their value, but you can get good values, like I said, in the draft board. So, I that's sort of how I look at a win now strategy. It's just taking advantage of those opportunities to just add good players that are going to produce right out of the gate for you. And hey, who knows? Maybe if you do this, go this route, maybe you build a team that wins a championship in the first year, and all of a sudden your next 8 or 9 whatever years worth of league fees are paid for just like that. So, any other quick thoughts on this on the win now strategy, Aaron, before we move on?
No, like I said, I mean, I think it can be a bit of a risk, knowing you could be stuck with these players. You might have these guys where you're gonna have them until they retire pretty much because nobody wants them, or at least you're not gonna find a trade that's that worthy to get him off your team for a return. So it can be risky, right? Especially if some of your guys go down with injury and then you're stuck with old players, and then next year you're not in a great position. So um, it's a nice kind of a risk. What's the reward going there in Dynasty?
Yeah, and I mean, you got it's really an emphasis on picking the right guys when you do that because I mean, if you drafted, and there's two sides of that coin. I mean, if you drafted Mike Evans in the 7th round of a startup last year, like it was great. He had an awesome season for you. He was a WR1. But if you took Nick Chubb in like the 7th round of a startup draft last year, like that grenade blew up on you, and now Chubb was. Like, if you tried to sell Chubb after his injury, like forget about it. You're taking a 3rd round pick maybe, which doesn't help, and he didn't help you score, which didn't help your win now build either. So there's definitely risks on all sides of this. There's risks to every strategy for sure, but it's the win now one. Believe it or not, is probably my least favorite strategy in a dynasty league. It's just not what I prefer to roll with. But we're not quite at my favorite one yet. But I'm more likely to go with the hybrid strategy over a win now approach. And with the hybrid strategy, essentially that's sort of splitting the difference between a win now approach, and where you're taking productive guys in your first four, I'd say even 5 rounds, young productive players. And then after that, you're more open to taking veterans, like some of those guys, like I mentioned, like Mike Evans, maybe not Nick Chubb this time around, but someone like a Josh Jacobs, David Montgomery type, maybe like round 7 or 8. So guys that now that I have my young core of players, I'm looking at it like, okay, now I'm willing to take at least a few of these veterans in the middle here, where I know I might not get amazing value from them in a trade down the line, but I still want to contend this year. And you do need at some point some veteran players on your team in order to be contending in the short term. So any thoughts on that, Aaron? Any thoughts on the hybrid approach to this? I know you were excited to kind of talk about that strategy a little bit before you came on here.
Yeah, no, I think likewise for me too. I think that's my favorite strategy too. I mean, that's kind of the best of both worlds. If you can find your young, productive guys that, maybe they haven't hit their peak performance yet, but you got them like the year before they blow up and they're a top five running back or top five wide receiver or something like that. Um, I think another thing with that approach too is like, that's where, the benefits of listening to like podcast and doing your research and taking into account their contract situations and all that. I think that's where all that really comes into place because then you can start building a team that's built to win and, they have great dynasty values. So honestly, I think that's probably the hardest strategy to go, but it pays off the most because yeah, you're built to win and you're built that hey, if you're stuck with those guys, you feel comfortable with them for the next 2-3 years if you have to.
For sure. And I also want to add one thing to this too when it comes to this approach. If this is your first year doing a dynasty league or maybe it's your second league ever, you don't have a ton of experience in dynasty, this is the strategy I would recommend for newer dynasty managers where you are getting those younger players early. Maybe you're passing on like the super productive guys that are older, like Tyreek Hill, CMC. You're passing on those guys in round three in favor of younger players. But then after that, you're more open to taking those veteran guys. And the reason I suggest that is because what it does is it gives you a nice, solid young core, and it also gives you some productive players that are going to support you now. And what that buys you is a window of, in theory, you're contending, but you also get to pay attention to what other teams in the league are doing. Maybe more seasoned dynasty managers taking different approaches, and it lets you kind of go through those cycles. It lets you go through a rookie draft in the following spring. It lets you kind of see what the prospect evaluation process is on that too. And you kind of get to experience every aspect of a dynasty league for a year or two while you're contending. And that's fun because it's going to keep you excited, to keep you invested, and you're not taking shots on these deep flyers later that might not be as good, even though they're younger. So it kind of mixes the world of kind of like a rebuild approach and a win now approach, right? And right, it's in the title. I call it a hybrid approach. So that's probably what you should do if it's your first dynasty league, just to kind of get the lay of the land on that. Aaron, would you agree?
Yeah, I think so. And I think like it's so funny, like to go back and forth between those two strategies is I think talking one specific call out is like rookie players. I think, we all know like the Marvin Harrisons of the world and, Jonathan Taylors of recent memory and players like that, right? That you feel they're gonna be come out the gates as being stud rookies. But I think it's also, important to remember like on the win now approach, you obviously don't want to rely on a rookie to be in your starting lineup where maybe your rookie might be like a bench player, right? Where in reverse, like you might take that risk, on the hybrid approach where like, hey, I'm gonna go with this one, rookie year, 1 year player that I think has extreme potential. But that also can backfire on you too. So where I think that it's very interesting when you're drafting rookies preseason that have never, played a snap yet, as well.
Yeah, you need those reliable producers if you're going to be in a win now mode. And I'd even be okay with if I really like my team in a win now mode, I'm okay with trading my future draft picks for the next year and for my 2025 picks in this example. Because if I like my team, I feel producers, I'm deep, like that's the time to really go for it and push it. So I'm more okay trading a future first round pick in that scenario versus the hybrid approach where, yeah, I like my team. I think I'm going to be good this year, but I want to hang on to that thing because just in case the season doesn't go well and it's an earlier pick than I think it's going to be, now all of a sudden I'm adding like a Marvin Harrison or a Malik Neighbors or Brock Bowers in a tight end premium or a good quarterback in Superflex. Versus if I give it away during the draft, now I'm helping someone else by losing games, and I don't want to do that. If I'm going to lose games in Dynasty, I need it to help me, and we'll talk more about that as we go down the line. Just know that you should be more okay trading a rookie pick in the right deal and win now than a hybrid approach, and certainly in the next approach that we're going to talk about, our third and final strategy here is the productive struggle approach. And essentially what this is you're saying that, okay, I'm in all likelihood going to be sacrificing winning games this season in an effort to build a very young team that's going to be competitive down the line. And if we're talking superflex formats, which let's be honest, most leagues nowadays are superflex, so that's where the majority of the conversation is going to lean. But if I'm in a superflex league, I actually still do want to get two good quarterbacks right out of the gate in this productive struggle approach because I want that position solidified. And from there, I'm open to moving back, but just know that this approach in general does take a lot of patience. And with this, you're hunting different things than a lot of your other league members are who are doing a hybrid approach or a win now approach. What I want here is I want to move back in the startup draft, and I want to get either more picks in the startup or I want to hunt future rookie picks, and mostly first round picks. And it's not necessarily the most fun thing to collect while your team's losing games every week, and to watch the points stack up against you. But in the startup, if you decided to go this approach, just know that there are going to be buying opportunities for your teams that are trying to win right now. Like maybe they'll see a couple good win now guys, and you're like, I don't really want those players anyway. I'm going to be going with a young wide receiver in the middle of round 6. But if you want to come up and get your guys, like I'm looking at your first 5 rounds of your draft, I know you and I aren't on the same page. I'm going to go ahead and kick this thing back, and I'm gonna ask for your first round pick next season, and I'm willing to move back a couple of rounds in the startup. Those are the type of deals that you should be hunting. in this format. And if I'm being honest with you, this is my favorite type of approach in a dynasty league. And that's mostly because I know the leagues that I play in, they're all comprised of people that I know that are going to be around for the long haul in a dynasty league. The league's not going to fold. So I have no problem being patient with this and let other people kind of come up there and go get those win now pieces. They'll be contending for the first 2 years. I will not be, but that's okay because I'm willing to just collect these first round picks. And we had a startup, Ethan's in a startup league that I was in, also involved with last year. And we're 1 year in. There's some newer guys in that league too, but we're a year into it, and I have 7 first round picks next year. I have I think it's 4 or 5 in 2026, and I have a couple in 2027. So I am like stacked with picks. I have no interest in winning games again this season. But after that, I'm going to be looking to turn the corner, and it can happen quicker than you think in this approach, because you'll see a couple years down the line, as bleak as it looks in the interim, you can't be losing the sight of the forest through the trees here, because a couple years down the line, these teams that went all in to win the first 2 years, they're going to start aging out. Their running backs are probably going to be 29, 30 years old. Some of their receivers are going to be in their early 30s, and they're not going to be as productive. So at a time where those good teams that were ahead of you for a couple years are downturning, you're actually going to be on the upswing. So it's an intersection of, yes, you're being patient, but eventually those assets turn into players in the form of draft picks, or you can also trade your draft picks and get other guys on your team to kind of supplement a good young core. And at the time where your other league, a lot of your other league mates are going the wrong direction, you're trending in the right direction. So I laid a lot on there for the productive struggle approach. Like I said, it's my favorite way to go in a startup league. But I guess, what are your thoughts on this approach, Aaron?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting one. I think the elephant in the room, I think, with all three strategies that's very important to talk about is this: you have to realize what you're doing, right? It's you can't be in a productive struggle approach and not really know it, right? What I've observed is, if there's fantasy managers out there that probably should be in a productive struggle situation, but they don't believe they are, or they're not making the right trades to keep going in that direction, right? So I think, like, certain things obviously have to happen, where, as you said, like, you accumulate first round picks. If we're going to be talking startups tonight too, to where, like, you're one of the guys that, in a startup where you give up like your first round pick, but you got all these maybe deeper round picks, and then you got some future first with the deal. Like, you're really going in that direction for that productive struggle, right? So I think step one is, like, realize where you're at and make the moves, either intentionally get there, right? Where most of the times, if you do it right, it has to be very intentional. Or sometimes you have to make the subtle move that no one was expecting, right? You can also go from, like, a win now team, and then realize, hey, all my guys are getting old. Let me take advantage of, hey, my running back was RB1 last year. Let me trade him at his peak, to where then you're starting to make those moves for future years. So I think it's just one, you got to realize where you're at, and with the productive struggle, you got to be very intentional, in my opinion.
Yeah, you can change your strategy as the years go by in Dynasty. I mean, if you draft a win now team, maybe you try to do it for a year, and then you just rip the band-aid out right after that one season where you're like, hey, my productive guys were good for me this year. Whether you won or not, maybe you decide at that point, like, hey, I'm going to start to get younger. And that it's essentially what you do there is you're buying yourself a 1 year window of contention, and then you're quickly getting out of it to pivot to safer assets so you don't have that long gap. But what I would say here with all three of these approaches to kind of put a bow on this topic is, you can have your favorite strategy. That's all well and good. I know I have mine, but you really do have to just play the board that's in front of you. And if win now pieces are falling into like round 9, 10, 11, and I have a bunch of guys that I'm good with that are young early, then okay, screw it. Like, let's get some of these older guys on my team. Like, that's fine. I'm willing to do that. I've done that in the past as well, and had varying degrees of results for it. I've made some deep playoff runs doing that too. But you know, it's all you should stick to a strategy for the most part, but you should definitely play the board and see how it unfolds before you just decide. Like before the 101 even comes off the board, like you're like, no, I'm going productive struggle no matter what. Like that's maybe in theory you want to do that, but they say, hey, in war they say no plan survives contact with the enemy, and you kind of have to have a similar approach in your dynasty league. Like, yeah, I have a strategy coming in, but if everyone's just scarfing up young guys and these veterans keep falling, like okay, forget about it. Like I have my young core. Let's go ahead and get some of these guys and try to win in 2024. Like there's nothing wrong with that. So just know that no matter which one you choose, that you got to be fluid during the draft as it unfolds. But once you get to like the middle parts of the draft, you should have an idea of what your strategy is and which direction you're going, even if it wasn't necessarily the strategy that you went into the draft thinking that you were going to utilize. So good talk on the couple strategies, Aaron. Let's talk about making trades, both during a draft, but we'll start with pre-draft in that process. So, do you have any thoughts on that, Aaron? Like, if you're trading startup picks before the draft gets going?
Yeah, so pre-draft is very interesting, and I think if you're a new dynasty manager and you've never had a startup draft in dynasty, it's definitely a different concept, right? Like, oh, I'm trading. What you're used to in a redraft setting is you draft your team and that's it, right? Like you're not making trades in the middle of the draft or pre-draft. That's kind of unheard of. So I think with in the dynasty realm, this was obviously a new concept to me when I first started out too. My I think of a couple mistakes, I made like my first startup. It's kind of, obviously that first round, when you even compare it to a redraft league, like wow, like just imagine in a redraft league if you have two first round picks, like that's gold, right? But on the reverse side in Dynasty, like what you have to give up to get two first round picks is like a king's ransom, right? So I think you got to make sure you don't over, like overvalue that first round where obviously those guys are, your top 12 picks are going to be great value no matter what, obviously, but don't sell the farm just to get it. I think is one of my first thoughts there. But then you know, I think also just pre-draft too is a sweet spot for me. I've realized is like rounds 4 through 6. I think you mentioned it a little bit ago. Is like rounds 4 through 6. That is opportunities when you can really start when league members really start showing their cards, right? So like rounds 4, 5, 6, that's really when you start seeing who's reaching on win now pieces, and you can see like, oh wow, like okay, that's the direction though these league mates are going. That creates other opportunities of like, hey, this is your players that have awesome dynasty value. Maybe that's where some of these rookies or 1 year players are available for you to draft. So I would say don't overvalue first round picks and don't undervalue rounds 4 through 6, as that those are some of your sweetest dynasty assets that are sometimes under the radar where you can sweep them away from your league mates.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, that's a good point. Like you said, rounds 4, 5, 6, 7. That's where people are making decisions, man. Like that's where they get off the away. Once the young producers are all gone, it's like, okay, are you going to go with the young receiver that might be really good for a long time, or are you going to take the aging running back who's going to be good for the next 2 years? So, yeah, good point there. Definitely agree on that front. And that becomes especially important, Aaron, when we're talking about leagues nowadays that are deeper than they ever were before. I mean, the first dynasty league that I ever played in, it was one QB, it was two running backs, two receivers, one tight end, and one flex, and that's it. Like, but now that's not really the case now. Like, we're seeing deeper formats than ever. Super flex is a different angle. Now the leagues require you to start three wide receivers. A lot of them. The leagues that don't, they have like three or four flex spots. Some will even have two tight end spots. So it's deeper than ever before. So just not devaluing those picks 4 through 6, 4 through 8, whatever you want to draw that line is so important because these guys are starting players for you, or these guys are you need more guys to fill out your roster than ever before. And especially if you want to have any sort of depth on your team, like you can't just give away those picks all willy nilly just on a whim like that. So you're absolutely right that those other rounds are very important beyond just rounds 1 and 2. But I want to talk about a little bit here of guys drafting before the draft starts. I mean, it's really fun. You get your league's buzzing right before the draft. There's offers flying around everywhere. But if you're gonna move a first round pick, or you're gonna go get another first round pick, you gotta have a damn good idea of what you're gonna get. Maybe not the exact player in mind, but you gotta know within a handful of guys who you're gonna be looking at drafting, especially if you're moving up in the draft. Like if you're moving up into the top 5 or 6 picks, it's gonna be for a quarterback in a super flex league in all likelihood. And that's a little easier because you know there's going to be a guy that you like there. But if you're doing that, you're probably know the price is going to be expensive. It's probably going to cost you if it's like a mid to late second round pick, it's probably going to cost you something like maybe like a fourth or a fifth, and then maybe even a future draft pick in there too, if a future first even. So you do have to be mindful of that if you're doing it. But I'm not saying that you shouldn't necessarily. Just know that when you trade pre-draft, if you're giving up multiple pieces to move up, you have an idea of what you're getting, Aaron. Would you agree?
Oh, for sure. I mean, I think that's where like, sometimes it sounds corny to do mock drafts, but I think it's still, very even though mock drafts don't represent exactly how things are go, generally, directionally, they're pretty accurate because like they usually rankings aren't over 12 players off. A lot of players you want in a certain round probably won't come back to you, right? So I think mock drafts are really important. You definitely got to have an idea where players are going to go. Obviously, understanding what type of league you're in was super flex and stuff like that. But yeah, for sure. I think if you're moving up, like you said, those first couple picks are going to be quarterbacks, and that's another thing is how high do you value certain quarterbacks, and if you are okay with passing up with some and moving on to others, I think that's where some of it starts on the superflex leagues. Is like you're gonna have to have your own opinions on your quarterbacks because there's perception of when value drops and where you want to where you're going to draft certain quarterbacks at, I think are very important because I mean we're talking dynasty, right? So those are quarterbacks that are going to be hopefully starting for 5 to 10 years as a starting quarterback, right? So I definitely agree there.
Yeah, I mean, you have to know that in Superflex for sure. And I mean, quarterbacks are super valuable in that format. I mean, there are 14 quarterbacks that I would take in the first 2 rounds. Like that's 24 picks. 14 of those guys are quarterbacks. That's how I've drawn the line in my estimation. I'm not going to list all 14 guys, but so you need to know that too. Like if you're moving out of the first 2 rounds, like just know that there's a chance that you might not have a top 15 quarterback. That's a very real possibility. And when I'm going to start up in a Superflex league, I'm usually sticking in the first round where I'm at, unless I'm getting an insane haul coming back to me. I'm going to stick there. I'm going to get a quarterback, and if I don't have at least a mid second round pick, like I'm probably moving up too. Like that's where I'm going to try to move up, even just a handful of picks, and go get a second quarterback because I want to just lock that position up right out of the gate in Superflex. I'm not messing around with that. I want to walk away from the first 2 rounds of my Superflex draft with 2 quarterbacks just about every single time. I mean, maybe if a quarterback's fallen, different story, but for the most part, that's what I'm doing. But after that, I'm very much open to moving back after that. Like I usually like to make a lot of my Superflex drafts have been move up from either the early mid second round to the back end of round one, or from the early second round, or rather from the late second round into the early second round to get a second quarterback that I'm good with. And then from there, I'm willing to move back and collect a value further down the board. So which kind of gives us to trading more so during the draft where we talk about using tiers and you have to do this. I don't know how you trade during a Superflex draft without using tiers, unless you're just moving out completely and getting rookie picks. I mean, if say you're on the and what I mean by that when I say tiers, I'll just explain it quickly. Is you essentially sort players into groups and you say, okay, I have these 10 players in a tier, and I am on the clock right now, and 6 of those guys are still available to me. So you say, okay, this is the time where I want to put this pick on the block. I want to use the time given to me, and I want to make it known that the pick's available. And then I also want to proactively send offers. Okay, don't just sit there and say, "Oh, this pick's available," and then sit on your hands for 24 hours and wait for someone to come to you. That's how you get nasty grams from your league mates. Like, do the legwork yourself. Say, "Okay, I'll move back 5 spots here, but I want to move up, a round and a half further down the board." Like, send those offers out there, or maybe I want to move back a full round, but you'll give me your second round pick 2 years from now, something like that. Like go hunt out those things, those trades, because if you're confident you're getting a guy in your tier, then you're potentially just leaving value on the board by picking in your spot, even if you like the guy you can get when you're on the clock. So that's one use of tiers, Aaron. I mean, do you have any reaction to that before I keep going on this?
Yeah, no, I think it's important to actually even take a step back. Like, I know you explained the tiers very well too, but like understanding, are you looking at the right set of tiers, right? Like if you're looking at rankings, like make sure do you have it filtered towards a super flex, if you're in super flex. Obviously make, there's different tiers made for different formats, right? So don't just use a generic redraft tier based, strategy. So obviously, I guess Commissioner, you're probably already given the fact that that you're looking at the right framework of your tiers, right?
You'd better be.
But that you
You better
better
be
be,
looking at
right?
the you better be looking at the right
Exactly.
format if you're drafting in Superflex. You can't be looking at one keep rankings. Hell no. And I would even I'm gonna let you finish, but I would I would even go as far as to say that like you should have your own tiers. Like forget about the
Yeah.
site, the platform you're drafting on. Like yeah, let other people follow the ADP or the expert consensus rankings on that if they want to, but do this exercise yourself. Or even if you don't have it right now, just count the board. Be like, okay, there's 6 guys left that I like here. Like I can move back 5 picks and be perfectly fine if not a few more picks. So do that exercise yourself, regardless of what platform you're playing on. Just wanted to toss that out there.
Yeah, no, I love that point. That's actually how I was gonna finish that too, is like use tiers and rankings towards your advantage, right? Too, to where like you can see the next 6 best available, right? But if you have, you listen to your Sunday Surefires or different podcasts or different things out there where you're like, oh, I like this guy 12 picks down. That's a perfect time to trade back. That's the power of trading back, I think, because you can really take advantage of that, especially once you start realizing who might be more of those win now teams are really building some of that older framework, as well, right? So yeah, that's the layer. I'm on the same page with you too, is like it's important to look at tiers. I think rankings are all fine and good, but also use them towards your own advantage, right? Because everything's not robotic, right? Where you can, when there's nobody's cracked the code where every ranking is perfect, right? So also use that towards your drafting advantage too.
Yep. Yep. And be confident in your process as well. I mean, be confident in the tiers that you've assembled and just move around the board. Like we talked about moving back a lot, but and I love moving back, but just to give the other side of it real quick on this before we move on is like say you're 6 or 7 picks away from being on the board. There's only 2 guys like that you like in a tier left on the clock. You know that's where you want to look to proactively send those offers to move up to go get that pick. Even if you're not sure, just say reach out, send that other manager a DM and say, hey man, like looking to come up from the 511 to the 505. Like what are you thinking? Like, do you have anything in mind? And if they say no, then you come up with an offer and shoot it over to them. And exactly what that offer looks like, who knows? But like you should attempt to get a guy in that tier if the price is reasonable. I'm not saying do it every single time by any means, but you should at least try to figure out what the price is to move up and not be afraid to do that if the right opportunity presents itself. And it would be a mistake to not do that. And which brings us to our next topic here. We're going to be talking about common mistakes that are made either during or before startup drafts, Aaron. So do you have anything that you want to lead off with here? Any common mistakes maybe you've made or you've seen your other league makes made over the years?
I think I've alluded to a few. Um, I think in my very first startup, I was obsessed with trying to get two first round picks, which I did. I think I ended up with the what did I have? I had the fifth pick and the seventh pick in my very first startup. And I basically gave up all my first to get there. I don't think I had a third rounder, maybe even a fourth rounder. So I had to wait couple, I made my first round selections, and then I had to wait, then I had to wait some more. Then I know, high value picks to trade up again, right? Because I already, you know, um traded away so many in those first couple rounds. So um I look back and wonder how the heck did I still win the championship year one? Because I really screwed up my first ever startup draft. I think I ended up just making a lot better just in season trades, but yeah, just like don't like all this advice we're trying to give pre-draft, like don't blow it on a couple players or don't overvalue different rounds if you don't really know what you're doing. I guess I would say like if you don't exactly know your strategy and taking all these things to account, like and you're just greedy, like you're just like, oh, 2 first round picks sound great, and you don't have an idea exact. Like I could tell you I had a decent idea who we were gonna draft, but I knew, a lot of the league was also new, so I really had no direction which way that draft was gonna go at the time. I just knew 2 first round picks sounded great. So I think that was my first ever mistake because it's funny, you know who it was? My first pick was Michael Thomas.
You know what? I'm actually looking at your draft right now because I know the league you're referring to. I have it pulled up in front of me.
Yeah,
You went Michael Thomas at the 105 and Dalvin Cook at the 107.
that's
And that
right.
was the year Michael Thomas fell off a cliff completely.
Yep.
Coming off
Yep.
a WR1 overall season, he kind of that's the year he turned into a pumpkin and never looked back.
That's
Dalvin Cook, on
right.
the other hand, though, was RB2 overall that year. And then you did
Yep.
not draft at all in the second or third rounds or in the fifth round, but you grabbed David Montgomery at the 412, which saved your season in a lot of ways because he was also a top five back that year. So
Right.
you made some mistakes
Right.
along the way. This is a super flex, folks, by the way, too, where Aaron really went for it with
Yeah.
non
Oh
QB.
yeah.
You know, you
I'll tell
wouldn't
you.
do this again
You
necessarily.
know that's exactly. You know what's funny? I remember. So that strategy, I was like, all right, I'll get a young quarterback first, and I think I waited till like round 9, I want to say, and I drafted Drew Brees because I was like, you know what, my backup plan is gonna be Jameis Winston. So I was like, I look viewed Jameis Winston was going to be their quarterback of the future, and I put a lot of eggs in that basket where Jameis obviously is Jameis. So
Yeah.
there goes that strategy.
So this is a league I was not in the first year of when this was going down. I joined the league later, but I mean, you must have done the Lord's work that year to win this championship, making trades in season because this is not the finest startup draft I've ever seen in my life.
No, it
But
was horrible.
that's why this is important to bring up though. Like I mean, there's things that you can learn from. There's lessons in failure, and I don't even really want to use the word failure because you won the league in year one. So,
Yeah, it's
but
crazy. It was Antonio Gibson was my saving grace because I ended up trading him for pennies on the dollar, and then I used Antonio Gibson, and he had a great year one.
yeah, this is terrible advice to give folks out there because essentially you're building a super flex team through the running back position. A few of these guys were, well, I guess some were on the older end, some were not, but like that's a really tight needle to thread. But I mean, you did it successfully, so hats off to you. But I like to think that if you could do it all over again, that you would build it a little bit differently, especially at
For sure.
quarterback. But hey, good for you for getting through some of these early ruts, but coming out with a championship as well on top of it. So good for you. Um, I guess I'll go to
Yeah,
some more common mistakes here, and I want to talk about trading away future draft picks. It's a mistake that I see dynasty managers make all the time, especially newer ones. And it's as fun as it is to send offers and field offers in a startup draft, like it's hard. It's a tough thing to value your rookie picks, especially when you're new, because you've never done it before. You've never gone through a rookie draft. You've never had peak rookie draft season hit you in the face like it does every April and May. So you really should try to hang on to your picks unless there's just a killer deal available to you, just to see how all that kind of plays out first. And the worst thing you can do is think that your team is excellent and that you're going to go on a championship run for this year and the year after and the year after. So you're constantly trading rookie picks out the window in an effort to win championships in the first year, and then you end up in a spot where, oh crap, I had 3 injuries pop up here. I have no depth on my roster, and the I have no means now to go get the depth to supplement my guys that are healthy. So that's an easy one that I see a lot of managers make early in the early going. And the other thing I see is them drafting older players too early. And what I mean by too early is like in the first like top 30 picks or so, where they're like, oh well, Christian McCaffrey's amazing and I know it's a superflex league, but I'm going to take him in the end of round one. Like, no, don't do that. Like, I don't care how many points he scores this year. I don't care if he's great for 2 more years. Like, I'm not taking that guy at the end of round one because he's a 28-year-old running back. Like the resale market for that guy is not good. Like what like you trade Christian McCaffrey right now, what are you getting in Superflex? Like a first round pick and maybe a small something? Like that's not enough for me if I'm drafting him in the first round or the early second round of a Superflex draft. I'm not doing that. I would rather take the seventh best quarterback on the board than I would the number one running back for this season in McCaffrey. So and this is just my personal take on this. Other people could feel free to disagree with it, like because McCaffrey's great for the short term, but I'm not that guy. Like Christian McCaffrey and Tyreek Hill, as awesome as they were in 2023, and as good as I think they're going to be in 2024. If this was a redraft league, I would take both those guys in the first round without thinking about it. But if it's a dynasty superflex league, I'm not touching those guys in the first three rounds. Like I don't care. Like I will take
Yep.
the 14th best quarterback if I'm building from scratch. If I'm building from nothing, I'm not taking an aging receiver or running back in the first three rounds. And like I said, other people can view it differently. That's just how I view it, and that's how I've had success doing it this way in Dynasty. So I guess any thoughts on either of those points, Aaron? Whether it's trading away your future rookie picks or kind of that balance of where to select older players in a Dynasty startup.
Oh, for sure. No, I mean, I don't have anything I disagree with you on. Definitely, that was a lesson I learned. I somehow had to crawl my way back. Yeah, it was the year one was not pretty. I was like I think I was like a six, like a six seed that then somehow won the league, right? But those Cinderella stories don't happen too often, especially when you blow your rookie draft as bad as I did. So yeah, definitely don't give up your future rookie picks. That kills you. I mean, the only way you can do that is if you draft a young, solid team. Is the only recommendation I can say. Like you can feel good because you know, hey, all my guys are pretty young, and I think you know you got maybe like the Justin Jeffersons or you know I'm on Ross St. Browns or people like that that you know are young enough that will produce. That you might not necessarily have to worry about a rookie draft in 2025. Maybe you build a 2026 or 2027. You know you refocus on getting first in those years or something. So yeah, and no other just no disagreements with you there.
Good answer. Good answer. Do you have any other common mistakes before I toss my last one out here?
Yeah, I'm sure there's a bunch. You know, I think we see a bunch throughout the draft and just drafting people a little too high based on their age. I think I just want to keep circling back to rookies again. Is like, you know, if you're trying to be a win now team and you're looking for your final maybe flex spot or even the hybrid approach, right? Like drafting in like even like round 10, 11, 12 could be rookies. I remember that was prime Denzel Mims territory as well too. It was like Denzel Mims, I think I took him round 10 that year too, like in my infamous year one startup too, to where yeah, so that's just like prime young player too, because that's where like you know, like rounds 10 to 12 can be some of those rookies. Trying to think of maybe some this year. Like that might be like your early, probably equivalent to like your second round picks in rookie startups, like maybe some of those second round wide receivers you probably get in rounds 10 through 12 too. So I think those can be make or break. Where if you got to choose, what I would say suggest there is if you got to choose between a rookie wide receiver in the let's call it 11th round, or a 1 year or 2 year wide receiver like maybe a Jameson Williams. Um, I would maybe go Jameson Williams over that rookie wide receiver just to have a little bit more confidence over them if you're going with a young guy there.
So let me give you a slightly better example. I think I smell what you're stepping in. You're on the right track. But so this is results of a startup draft that went down last week. That's a 10. This is a 12 team superflex league. With the 10-03, someone took Adonai Mitchell. At the 10-6,
Yep.
someone took Amari Cooper, which is essentially exactly what you're talking about. Like it's
Yep.
do I want the 30-year-old veteran who's been rock solid and steady for years, but is now older and has a year or two left? Or do I want the high upside mid or maybe early second round pick in Adonai Mitchell, who has opportunity to carve out a role for himself, you know, as early as this year? And if he hits, he's going to be awesome for the long run, and he'll just in a span of a month, once September hits, he'll be more valuable than Cooper. And I can, if I want to trade him, I can get more for him than I ever could have for that pick. Like that's more, I think, a better example of
Yep.
what you're trying to say. Would you agree?
Yeah, for sure. I think you're gonna have constant battles where you got a veteran guy that can probably be a top 15 wide receiver, that's proven it, or you got to take a leap of faith with those rookies. But there might be other guys that might squeeze in there, like year two, year three guys that are on the verge too, but might not have that exact one, that scenario there too. But yeah, no, I mean that's definitely what I'm talking about. You got to make those decisions in those rounds because still rounds 10 through 12 are still pretty valuable
Yeah, for
rounds.
sure. For sure. And especially if you're in a deeper league. And I think by round 10 or 12, you've actually kind of already made your decision based on what your earlier decisions were in terms of did you move back a ton? Are you playing for down the line, or did you draft win now pieces? And are you now invested? And I think that kind of makes the decision for you in a lot of ways versus, you know, just thinking like, oh, I kind of like this receiver here. I think he's a good young player. I was like, well, no. If you're in win now mode and you still have a starting spot to fill, like you almost have to take Amari Cooper in the scenario I laid
Right.
out because you need the points he's going to give you in week one this year and for the duration of this season versus Donnie Mitchell. Like, yeah, he might be good. And if he is, great. But like, I can't wait around for you to figure out like with a quarterback who likes to run around and who has question marks about his passing ability. Like I can't take on those
Yep.
question marks. I need the certainty that comes with Cooper in win now. But if you're in a productive struggle approach, maybe you're either looking to move that pick back and let someone else come up and take Cooper, or if you can't, maybe you say, okay, screw it. I like Mitchell. Maybe he's my guy in the future. I don't know. That just it's kind of at that point. I think the decision's been made for you. So kind of the
Yep.
lesson there is I think sticking to the strategy that you've already determined to that point in the draft. But I have one more point that I want to talk about here in terms of common mistakes that I see in superflex drafts, and that's devaluing quarterback early in the superflex draft. I mean, people can kind of get mesmerized by like these top end wide receivers, and I get it. I mean, like Jamar Chase is awesome. Amon-Ra St. Brown's awesome. I mean, I have those guys in the top four of receivers, like most people do. But even if you like double tap receiver there, say you take St. Brown if you're at the 112 and you come back with someone like Marvin Harrison Jr. or another top end guy like Garrett Wilson, something like that. In the late first, early second round, you took receiver. Like now you're waiting a long time to get back on the board to get your second quarterback. Like these are long waits that you have to get your first or second quarterback. So I would highly recommend just hitting the button on those quarterbacks early on because it's the easiest time to get quarterbacks on your roster. Is because all you got to do is click the damn button that says draft and you get the guy on your team for however long, 10 years in some cases, or how long these guys play at that position. Whereas if you miss the boat at quarterback, even if your receivers are excellent, you're going to have to overpay to correct that mistake down the line. And it's probably going to be crazy expensive. Like you see some quarterbacks deals go down and it's easy to look back and think like, wow, if they had just selected a quarterback there, they wouldn't have had to trade for first round picks or two young players and two first round picks to get that second quarterback that they need to contend on their roster. So I always want to build up my QBs and Superflex. I've said it a couple times already, but by the end of round two, I want it. Maybe in some cases, like if I have an early third round pick and I'm only waiting a couple of spots to get my second quarterback, maybe I'll wait till my third round pick and I'll grab a receiver that I like there. But in all likelihood, man, I'm just double tapping quarterback and calling it a day there.
Yeah, I think it's very safe to do that, right? I guess, if you got your your first and second round, I go back and forth a little bit. I think the only other route you could potentially do is to draft your top end wide receiver. Because I do look at, you know, seeing what they go for on the market, where yeah, you're maybe you're back in tier one wide receivers or tier two wide receivers, not who I'm talking about. It's more like your Justin Jeffersons. It's really might just be Justin Jefferson, might be the only one I'd possibly consider. Maybe Marvin Harrison if you're going that direction where you're betting on they're going to be a King's ransom, like the 3, 4 first round picks. But then again, you don't see that many trades that are those type of wide receivers for quarterbacks. Like they just don't mix very well in trades usually. Usually you got to go like you don't get a top end quarterback for trading those guys. You might get a lot of nice pieces, but you might have to hope that you're going to hit on a future first, like a Caleb Williams in a draft, in a future draft. So I would say if you don't go quarterback, the only other option to go is possibly a top end wide receiver. But yeah, I'm gonna agree with you. Like quarterback's the safest and smartest route to go, knowing that they score the most points and you're starting two of them every week. So it depends if you feel like you can maybe grab somebody, or you've done other trades where you can grab maybe you've traded for another 2 seconds where you might want to get maybe trying to think of somebody like Jaden Daniels, right? In a second, if you're really high on him, that's kind of where he's going in like the mid to late seconds. But at that point, you're taking a little bit of risk on a rookie, which what I'm saying not to do too. So
Yeah, I mean, I don't have much to add. Like, I'll just say like I'm hammering quarterback, even if it's Jaden Daniels. If he's my second quarterback, I'm good with that. He was a top 5 pick in the draft. Like, he's going to get every opportunity to succeed. He's got rushing upside. He's got a great play caller. Like, I'm cool with that. I'm good with Jamin. I'm good with him as my second quarterback. I'm taking him in round 2, right in that spot, that wheelhouse. Depending on who's on the board, of course. But yeah, if that's what it takes to get him, I'm going to do that as well. And I just have one other really, really fast thing to toss in here at the end, but that's in terms of knowing what's coming down the pike in rookie drafts. And this really more so pertains to every strategy, but a lot more so into the productive struggle approach, because in that approach, you're collecting future draft picks. You're getting future first round picks. So you have to have an idea of what's coming in the future rookie class. And I used this example when we had Derek Brown from Fantasy Pros on a few weeks ago. And that's the 2023 season was a great time to sell off a quarterback in a productive struggle approach, because you can get a really good value for that. You can get a number of first round picks. If you're selling a QB and not taking one back, I mean, this is why it's so important to take them early in a startup, in my opinion, is because when you look to move on, like, you can get crazy value. Like, I traded Trevor Lawrence in a league, and between 3 different trades, it ended up being the return ended up netting me 5 first round picks in a third, which ended up
yeah,
being Jermaine Burton, who I like too. So 5 first in a throw in for Trevor Lawrence. Like, he's not worth that. And I know I had to hunt 3 different deals to get that value in the end, but that's what you're doing in a productive struggle. You're getting those draft picks. And the reason I say to look at future classes, and I was willing to do that because I knew that I was going to end up with a top 3 pick. And sure enough, I ended up with 2 of them. I ended up drafting at 101 and 103 and another mid first round pick too. So I knew that I could sell off a Trevor Lawrence for that insane value, because I could just turn around and draft Caleb Williams at 101. I could get
yep,
Jaden Daniels in the middle of the first round too. So like I can address them with individual rookie picks while still getting the difference in value on my roster. And to project forward a year from now, the 2025 draft class is filled with running backs. There's a ton of good backs in this upcoming class. And I'm not going to sit here and list all of them, but that's a whole other show that we'll do down the line. But know that if you go the productive struggle approach, you can really fade running back this year. Like, this is a year to say, like, hey, you know what? My first 9 picks, I'm not drafting a running back. I don't care what the starting requirements are. I'm getting 3 quarterbacks in those 9 rounds, and I'm coming away with maybe a 1 or 2 tight ends, and the rest are going to be young wide receivers. Like, and I don't care about 2024. Like, that's fine. I'll willing to lose this year, and maybe I'll throw some darts at running backs later. Some guys that are going in the late second, early third of rookie drafts that you can get in rounds like whatever 11 through 14 in this class. Like, I'm willing to do that and be fine with it. But know that if I acquired a few first round picks, the running backs that are going to lead my team to success aren't on my team right now, but they're going to be 11 months from now in my rookie draft next May. So I think that
yep.
was worth bringing up here at the end here, Aaron. Any last parting thoughts on that?
Agree. I'll say one quick thought too, and you brought it up too, is the importance of drafting a third quarterback in a super flex league. I think is don't undervalue that. Where I think if you look, even if you it works with all 3 strategies we talked about tonight. Because even if you think about win now approach, you still want to win when your quarterbacks are on a bye. You want to have an injury plan if one of them go down, right? You want to fill in a quarterback you can rely on, right? So it works for win now. the hybrid approach, I think that works because, as you said, you can use that third quarterback. Maybe you have someone you can use for leverage, where maybe you might be able to trade that quarterback for a couple pieces, or maybe you might then be able to look at a nice wide receiver, running back later. So if you look at like value in a super flex and you draft your third quarterback reasonably high too, I don't think that's a bad strategy to do either, because you know how much value quarterbacks hold in those leagues. So even don't undervalue your third quarterback as well.
Yeah, I totally agree. As a general rule of thumb, the deeper the league is from a starting requirement standpoint, the later you can wait to draft your third quarterback. Because the reality is, most people in startup drafts are looking at their starting lineup. They say, I have to fill this thing completely before I even think about a bench player, which is the wrong way to do it. It just is. Like, in the startup draft I saw recently, I'm seeing guys like Deshaun Watson's going in the ninth round. Like, Bo Nix is
Yep.
going in the 11th round. Rodgers, 11th round. Guys like Geno Smith in the 12th round, Derek Carr in the 14th. Like, these are guys
Yep.
that are starting NFL quarterbacks like this year and maybe even for
Right.
multiple years. And they're getting them at ridiculous values because people are looking at the board and being like, I need to fill out my third flex spot. Like, no, you don't. You don't. It's the middle of
Right.
June. Like, what are you doing? Like, you're not starting
Right.
a lineup today. Like, you're trying to build a quality roster for, and deal in theory the long run. And by doing that, you don't even realize it, but you're passing up value in the process because quarterbacks get hurt every year, especially last season where it was a meat grinder at quarterback. Like,
Yep.
you draft even Aaron Rodgers is 40 years old, for Christ's sake. But if you draft him in the 12th round of a startup draft, he's your third, maybe even fourth quarterback if you really hammer the position. Like, someone else has an injury, like a win now team says like they're all in it, whatever. They had two good quarterbacks. What if one of them tears their ACL? What if one of them gets concussion? They're out for the next 3 weeks. Like, now
Yep.
all of a sudden that guy in Aaron Rodgers becomes way more valuable to them than they are to you, and they're willing to overpay for it. Now you just took an 11th or 12th round pick and you turned it into a first round pick next year plus, when you would never have been able to do that when that pick was on the clock. So it's a great point by you and pointing out the importance of getting that third round pick. And I would just say, just know that the deeper the format is, the more likely you are to get a good value on that quarterback.
Yep.
And that's what we got for you, folks. That was a fun episode, buzzing through some startup strategies, some common mistakes, and talking about trading and the importance of tiers in there. So some good gems for you along the way, folks. Thanks for checking in. Make sure you're following us wherever you get your podcast. We're on YouTube. We're on X at Sunday_Surefire, on Facebook, Sunday Surefire, Instagram as well, Sunday Surefire. But until next time, folks,
Oh,
peace.
and hit up the comments. Hit up the comments on YouTube too. If you got any questions over the episode, drop them in our YouTube channel. Now we'll get a nice thread going.
Blow up all those comments, Aaron. Don't you interrupt me again, though. I'm watching you.
Sorry.
All right, folks, for real this time. Until next time, peace.